morning. Welcome everyone to the Atlantic Council conversations at the IMF headquarters here in Washington, D.C. during the Spring Meetings Week. Thank you all for joining us remotely. I am Rasha Halwa, the director of the Atlantic Council's Empower Me initiative, and I'm honored to be here with my esteemed guest, Mr. Jihad Azour.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, of course.
It's a pleasure.
Welcome. The IMF Director for the Middle East and Central Asia. Our discussion today will focus on the revised economic forecasts for the Middle East and North Africa region and the impact of the escalating geopolitical tensions and disruption of shipping on the economies of the region. Welcome, Jihad. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. So before we start addressing MENA in particular, give us a quick overview of the global economic prospects for the coming year.
Well, the economy is more resilient this year and proved to be able to address some of the key challenges. Inflation is one. Recovery is another one, but yet still recovery is uneven. The issue of addressing some of the impact of the various shocks is still there. Since COVID and the successive shocks, the economy has been able to recover, but not at the same level of growth that we had before, which represent a challenge going forward. There are still certain number of important issues to deal with. The job on monetary policy is well done, but not yet fully done. The issue of emerging economies, and especially those who are facing high level of debt, is an important challenge, especially that interest rates went up and this increases the burden on them. The capacity for the global economy to work together despite some of the tensions we saw recently on trade is an important priority for us. And also how we prepare the future. During this week, we discussed a lot around the activities of the future, AI, technology, climate, and so on. Those are important priorities for us. We need to prepare the world for it, both in terms of opportunities, but also to address some of the challenges that will come with that. AI may create new jobs, but also may destroy others. And last but not least, the issue of support to low-income countries. We have needs that need to be met, and those countries need assistance. We at the fund, we have scaled up our support globally since COVID, and we are keeping our promise. But we believe that more should be done to help those low-income countries, fragile states, to recover and get out of their difficult situations.
Absolutely, Jihad. And now shifting more towards MENA, what are the prospects for economic growth, and also considering the turbulent political landscape, particularly the Israel-Gaza conflict and the recent escalations we've had through the past days, disruptions to shipping in the Red Sea, how do geopolitical tensions impact economic growth, and through which channels particularly?
Well, definitely. I think what is being capturing the attention of everyone, including on the economic front, is the level of uncertainty that has went up dramatically since October last year. The war on Gaza is having a devastating impact on the Palestinian economy, relatively large impact on neighboring countries, but it's to be differentiated.
Do we have any estimates? I know the World Bank came with an estimate for critical infrastructure amounting to 20 billion.
I will go back to that.
Yeah.
And there is the third dimension, the channels of communication beyond the epicenter and the first group of neighboring countries. But beyond that, I think also it's important to highlight that there are certain number of positive developments. Inflation is coming down in most of the countries except few like Egypt, Sudan, or Pakistan. The level of inflation is getting closer to the historical averages. Yet vigilance is very important still. The pattern of growth, especially in the oil exporting countries, where the growing impetus coming from the non-oil sector is also encouraging. The effort that we see countries making into renewable, green energy, building the future of post-fossil fuel is also encouraging developments. Yet, there are some important challenges beyond the geopolitical, which is a big one. You have the issue of debt, especially for the middle-income countries. You have the issue of fragility. We have 7 countries in conflict or quasi-conflict in the region. only taking the example of Sudan and the example of Yemen gives you an illustration how difficult the situation is and how important to highlight the needs of those countries and those people who are in a dire situation.
And the GCC, we just mentioned, the pro-growth elements focused on economic diversification, moving away from hydrocarbons to other sort of technology-based sectors, renewable energy, services largely. How are they particularly getting affected through their pro-growth path by the recent events and geopolitical tensions?
It's an important question, which in fact one has to look at it from what are the key channels of the transmission. One important one is trade. We saw an increase in uncertainty and even more on the key trade routes. Few figures. 1/3 of the container shipping in the world goes through the Red Sea and Suez Canal. Almost 15% of the global trade goes through this strategic route. Also, more than 1/3 of export of oil and gas come from the region. Therefore, trade and the channels of trade are now impacted by the crisis. How this materializes: one, increase in cost, increase in uncertainty that has led to a diversion of trade routes to other parts of the world. That with time could lead to maybe more radical changes in the way the value chains are organized. The second channel is oil and gas. Oil and gas is always considered as a sector with a high sensitivity to geopolitical. We see less of that, and this for a certain number of reasons. One, we have excess capacity that exists. We have spare capacity of more than $7-8 million at the OPEC level. And this could cover whenever there are shocks. Two, we have been managing shocks over the last few years. We had COVID shock that had an impact also on the supply. We have the war in Ukraine that had a big impact on the supply of gas, etc. Therefore, the market has adapted to that. The supply has adjusted to that. And three, we are in a situation where, although there are flare-ups of tensions, but clearly we saw previous incidents, the 2019 attack on Aramco and other events have built in more resilience to those kind of risks. The last element is financial transmission. The financial transmission led to two things. One is some volatility and increase in level of risk perception by investors. This affects middle-income countries in the region and affect also FDIs. Those are the two main dimensions. Investors are usually vigilant when they see tension in terms of planning their investment.
That's a very good point, Jihad, on the investment and investors' perception. There is always a gap between policies and perception. Policy, there's a time lag. And now with the events, this adds more pressure. So thinking of the middle-income countries of the region, Egypt, for example, underwent an extensive economic crisis, through foreign exchange shortages and financial market instability. And recently, the government was able to secure a massive FDI deal with the UAE and extended the financial support from the fund to $8 billion. What new recommendations has the IMF put forward to ensure the sustainability of economic reforms in Egypt?
Well, okay, you are here opening a new big file. I think what has happened is a conjunction of three things resolved by the authorities to implement the reforms that are needed for Egypt. And there are three key streams of reforms. I'll go into that maybe later. But I think we saw a resolve and determination, which led to the acceleration of the implementation of the first and second review of the program that we have signed with the Egyptian authorities back in 2022. Two, there is definitely a recognition of the potential of Egypt as an investment destination. And this new investment is an opportunity for that. And three, I think also the international community recognizes that they need to provide support to Egypt. Those three elements have helped to move into more than one direction. The first direction is to put the train back on track through a certain number of key measures. One is the flexibility in the exchange rate that protects Egypt from external shocks. Exchange rate management, it's not a purpose, it's a process.
Absolutely.
It serves another purpose, which is economic stability. Therefore, I think now we moved into that, and it proved to be very positive because market reacted immediately positively, and also the internal private sector reacted positively. The gap that we used to have between the official rate and the market rate now this gap has narrowed, and it's almost zero. The backlog that existed has been or in the process of being resolved, and the private sector now is investing further or planning to invest further. This is an important element. Two, protect the economy from inflation. Inflation, it's a very silent but bad disease because it's not only destabilizes your economy, but it erodes your social stability. And the resolve of the government to address it and by the central bank to take the necessary measures for that is very important. Three is the role of the state. First of all, by continuing the consolidation, but also considering that it's important that not only the budget, but other parts of the public sector activities need to contribute to this effort. This is one dimension, by more discipline, more transparency on their operation. But also, if we don't grow the Egyptian economy, we will not create jobs, we will not improve the stability of Egypt. And for that to happen, we need the private sector.
Absolutely.
You have a very vibrant private sector in Egypt, and therefore they need to be given the opportunity. Have the state supporting them, not competing with them. Therefore, we are at an important juncture. Things have improved, but we are not yet out of what we need to be done. Credibility is coming back, and I would say it's an opportunity to accelerate this re-engineering of economic policies.
Yeah, I guess the private sector factor is important, and this has been mentioned in many of the events we had with the Egyptian government the past few days, and we're hoping to see changes along these lines, because obviously macroeconomic stabilization is key, but then structural reforms are essential to maintain growth. Jihad, now let's think a little bit about the in conflict countries and the region, fragile states. They've already been struggling with, like civil wars, very low economic growth, poverty, migration, displacement, and right now, pressure has added up. What is the outlook for these countries, and how is the fund thinking differently to help them?
Well, you are raising an important issue, and you are asking key questions on that. What we have tried to do this year is, and one of our analytical chapter in the outlook is to try to assess the impact of conflicts and how durable are their impacts. And clearly, the result of our analysis is showing that conflicts tend to be more durable in terms of their economic and social consequences. And their frequency is increasing. And currently, in fact, we are in a situation where you have long-lasting conflicts. Therefore, it's an important issue. This requires, first and foremost, is to do the utmost necessary to end those conflicts. While ending those conflicts also, it's important to preserve lives and livelihoods. Therefore, we call for more support in terms of helping those people. We have one of the largest concentration of refugees. We have one of the highest ratio of people who are living on assistance. You cannot create a future with those two level of context. Therefore, you need to address those. And this calls for a major support by the international community, especially now that diversion of attention is easy. We want to focus the attention on that. What the fund is doing. The fund is doing many things on that. One, we want to help countries with whom we can provide financial support. This is the case for Somalia. We have helped Somalia to reach a level of debt relief, and we were very happy last December that after 10 years of constant and continuous effort, we reached that. We were hoping to do this with Sudan, but unfortunately, since last year, the situation is dramatically deteriorating. We are trying to help countries like Lebanon, Yemen, deal with their difficult situation. Here we cannot lend, but we can provide technical assistance. We can help prepare them to be ready to get financing. And also, we are increasing our resources on the ground. We're increasing the number of people who are helping those countries. We're increasing our technical assistance. We're increasing the number of resources that are dedicated to help those. Because it's not only about giving them money. Sometimes you need to help them rebuild their institutions in most of the cases. And this requires policy support and technical support. But again, I think the amount of challenges that are growing and the war on Gaza has made it even more challenging, requires bigger and more coordinated effort in order to move the needle. And with not only the support to preserve lives and livelihoods, but also to provide hope.
Yeah,
and providing
absolutely.
hope requires that we think the future. And I think it's a time for us, collectively, to look into something that is grand, realistic, but ambitious
Ambitious and
for,
hopeful.
for the region. It's impossible to only fix individual problems without having a more a broader strategy for the region. And this is something that we look forward to work with others to develop.
This is key, and absolutely a more holistic, vision to think about pro-growth policies in the region is important. Now, thinking of the region growing at different speeds because of all the dynamics we just mentioned, how can economic integration help in this sense? Like I'm trying to think of a similar example for the EU integration by integrating East European countries, sort of growth managed to sort of synchronize somehow. How is this applicable within the context of the region, given all the challenges?
One, it's applicable, and then I think we need to rethink about it. Two, we need to take the context into consideration. I think this is the other key word. We cannot replicate models that serve other geographies, other geopolitical situations. But I think there are important avenues for that. And they could be led by certain number of initiatives. Climate is one.
Yeah, absolutely. Renewable
issues,
energy is a perfect
Climate issues, it's not something that you can confine in a country. Climate catastrophes are spread. Therefore, climate is something that can unify countries. Technology, the mobility of talents. And we saw the positive impact of that. The moment some of the GCC countries amended some of their regulation to provide more flexibility to labor and also more stability to the expats and the foreign labor, it has improved productivity, created growth, and increased the local demand, because those people are now more integrated into the internal economy.
Yeah.
Therefore, doing more of that by removing barriers. Those are easy steps. The third one is to have investment that transcend geographies, be it in infrastructure and technology and so on, because we have small markets. The whole region is 6% or 7% of the global GDP. If it is fragmented, it is not very attractive to investors. Therefore, we need to remove those barriers. I'm not saying that we need to solve all the problems at once, but I think we need to be strategic and tactical at the same time. Strategic by seeing that there is a value of creating new activities, even around trade, that could leapfrog growth. Tactical is not to get stuck into the complexities of the region, and therefore find ways to move, as Europe did in the beginning. Europe started with a very narrow agreement with low ambition and then scaled it up. I think we need to reinvent something similar.
Makes sense, Jihad. And you touched upon many important elements. As you mentioned, they create opportunities and challenges at the same time. Innovation and AI is one, climate is one. Let's take them one by one. So the AI revolution and 4.0 revolution has been progressing very quickly. If we compare this to the earlier technology revolution through the internet and mobile. This took like 20 years, and government were then able to adjust, but now we're talking about a 5 years framework, and governments don't even know at this point how they're going to be impacted. Uh, how is MENA ready for this, and how is the fund adjusting its own vision and policies and assessment plan to integrate AI aspects into the equation?
Let me first say it's a new thing, and we are all exploring it. And the best way for me to answer this question is to start from where you ended. If I take the previous one and I look forward, we were we expanded fast in terms of utilization of technology, less in integrating technology into other processes, and much less into producing technology.
Absolutely.
Therefore, I'm not afraid that we will be among the fast growing users because mobile penetration is extremely high. The use of social media is extremely high in the region. But I think where we have this time another important priority for us, that this technology is based on knowledge. We need to grow the knowledge. For example, the Arabic-based knowledge.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the language will be obsolete, and the capacity of it to regenerate new knowledge will be limited and narrow. Therefore, we need to think about the nature of this new technological revolution. Two is how to be more, not only users, but more, actors in it. And here, there are different things that we should do. One is to understand how this is going to integrate into making our economy more productive, more competitive, and accelerate those transformations. If I take the previous one, it took us time to move into GovTech and all these things. I think now we need to accelerate the pace. And three, find ways where we can play a role. I see a lot of strategic thinking about that. For example, Saudi, UAE, they have been showing great deal of interest, announcing big ambitions. I think it's important to take it seriously this time.
Absolutely, Jihad. And I know that the fund has now developed what is called the AI Readiness Index, and this sort of gives an initial indication of how countries are ready to meet with the new challenges. So this actually gives hope that the sort of global institutions are also adjusting to the
We have also our part
fast pace.
Our part to do, because again, those are changes that will affect our work, and we want to make sure that we are at the cutting edge of technology to help countries on that too.
Yeah. And let's go back to think about debt. I know that the region faces high levels of debt. Particularly, I'm thinking of the middle-income countries. Egypt, Jordan, debt to GDP ratios exceed 90%. Lebanon exceeds 100%. How is debt management applicable in this context?
Well, debt management is not should be applicable. It should be strategic here.
Yeah.
Because in a context of increasing interest rates, it's not only the burden of the debt over the economy, it's the cost of the debt that becomes more and more challenging. Because you need more resources, more taxes in order to pay the additional debt service that you have. Therefore, it's very important to address it and address it decisively. How to address it? I think the starting point is fix the fiscal house. You cannot, in a sustainable way, reduce your debt without fixing your fiscal house. Reducing the fiscal house is making sure that you have the right pace of consolidation, which is evenly distributed in terms of burden, with equity, especially on the revenue side, making sure that while you are consolidating on the expenditure, you don't let important group of the people who are vulnerable be left alone, and therefore redirect spending to focus more on social. And there are certain reserves here. The reform of the inefficient, unproductive, regressive energy subsidy is the best way for you to redistribute public resources in a more efficient way, in a more socially mindful way. Therefore, you have opportunities here. Consolidation has to continue and has to be growth friendly and social friendly.
Is the problem
But
more?
it's not only that.
Yeah.
The other thing is the size of the state need to be recalibrated. It's not by growing the number of SOEs and the assets that you have in the state that you will grow the economy. It proved to be not the best way. We need to re-engineer this, because by re-engineering this, you create more space to the private sector and reduce the risks on the state. Three is you have to address the debt. And here, there are technical issues, or there is a technical part and policy part. The technical part, you need to deepen your financial markets. You need to have predictable macroeconomic framework that gives assurances to investors. You need to diversify your investors. But also, you need to elevate this at the level of commitment that it's not stop and go. I do effort this year, and next year I will go back to the old habits. It has to be consistent, it has to be credible.
Absolutely, Jihad. And so Tunisia has been going through some economic turbulences. Then last year, I remember the delegation was here discussing a relief program with the fund, and then we haven't heard much about it. Where are the discussions standing now?
Oh, we have reached what we call staff level agreement. We
Okay.
agreed on the policies,
Okay.
and the good news was that the policies were designed by the government, and it was a Tunisian program, and they were proud of that. We have reached staff level agreement on a program that was well balanced, that took into consideration the experience of the past. And also we worked hard to mobilize additional assistance because we needed more support by the partners of Tunisia. Unfortunately, the authorities decided to put it on pause. And it has been put on pause for more than a year now by the decision of the authorities. We at the fund, in fact, we serve clients. We don't impose on clients. We serve members. Therefore, the moment they decide otherwise, we are still ready to help them. But I think the most important issue is the level of challenges is growing because uncertainties are high. The macroeconomic stability is gradually and slowly being eroded at a time where you need more growth for a country like Tunisia. Tunisia is not growing fast compared to neighboring countries.
Yeah.
And it's not creating enough jobs for a highly talented population, one of the most well-educated and equipped to generate additional growth. And also, the lack of external support has led to more financing by the central bank and by the local financial markets, which creates diversion. What we call, it crowds out, in fact, the private sector. Therefore, it's very important for Tunisia to accelerate those reforms. And it's very important for Tunisia to put the resources where the resources are needed. They have a very regressive subsidy system on gasoline where the last highest decile gets, in terms of subsidy, equivalent to the other 9. And a subsidy that is costing Tunisia between 4 to 6% of GDP on gasoline. It's a massive wasted resource. And therefore, we encourage them to reform it, to be more socially equitable with the Tunisian population.
And I know that their neighbor, Morocco, on the opposite side, has made sustainable progress in terms of promoting growth, and this has been quite promising. What other sort of lessons can they learn from Morocco? I mean, the two markets are more or less similar in terms of size, and maybe there are lessons to take?
Of course. I think the first lessons is reforms. The reform is a journey. It's not a one-off. And it's not because somebody else brought it to you that you should not take it. When you go to the doctor, you go to someone who is other than you, but who knows about your case and other cases, and will tell you what is good for you. Therefore, I think commitment and resolve and understanding that it's a journey, this is one. Two, um, what are the key opportunities for Tunisia? It's a country that needs more opportunities because it has talents. One of the highest ratio of highly educated people in the region are in
Absolutely.
Tunisia. Therefore, why you want the public sector to be limiting the capacity of the entrepreneurs of Tunisia from creating jobs? Why you want to allocate resources to inefficient set of companies and not to give these resources to fast growing, energetic, young talents in Tunisia. And also, why you want to be inward looking for an economy that historically been one of the most connected. We saw Morocco developing new markets with Africa, being part of the global value chain, using their logistics hub in Tangier to be one of the most active logistics platform that serves Europe. Therefore, there are opportunities. They need to be seized. And also, doing this without recognizing that stability is very important too, because investment will come because there are opportunities, but investment will stay if there is stability. And if you don't have a macroeconomic stability, it's very difficult to attract long-term investors.
Yeah, makes sense, Jihad. Now, maybe let's shift to the GCC again. Saudi has presented itself in a new form, really moving away from the focus on oil, heavily investing in the technology sector, being able to attract foreign investments and be a promising destination even for tourism. How sustainable do you think this trend is, and what are the key factors of success?
Well, one, this bold and strong move that started few years ago, 6 years ago, is paying off. The level of growth of the non-oil sector is, and despite shocks, stable and consistent. And it's now driving the growth in the economy, despite the increase or reduction in oil
Prices.
production. Therefore, the non-oil sector has proven, or the diversification has proven to be an important way of growing the economy and successful one. Two, which is very interesting, is reforms of the labor market, allowing greater women participation in the economy, increasing the flexibility to allow foreigners to get into the market, proved to be extremely useful because at the same time you created jobs, you reduced unemployment for the youth, and you increased women participation. What Saudi has set as target for 2030 in terms of women participation has been achieved last year. It tells you how fast the economy responded to those policies. Therefore, policy-driven transformation, reform-driven transformation is more sustainable than investment-driven transformation. Two, to take bold measures in terms of opening up the economy proved to be extremely beneficial. The size of the Saudi economy is the largest in the region,
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
allowing this economy also to be beneficial for further integration, because Saudi could play a role of a magnet, because this is the largest economy in the region and one of the most integrated internationally. Therefore, it can be the magnet that around it you can create new opportunities for other countries. And also, Saudi and the GCC are drivers of integration of the region with other parts of the world, with China, with Africa, with East and Central Asia. All these agreements that are being promoted would be, I think, I hope will be, in the future, avenues for greater investment, greater economic integration.
Thank you, Jihad. Now let's think a little bit about gender
Yes.
in the region. Gender inequality in MENA exceeds the global average, with labor force female participation averaging around 20% in MENA versus close to 50% globally. How is gender inequality impacting economic growth, and which countries are doing better than others in the region?
Gender opportunity is one of the greatest opportunity for the region in the next 10 years. And it's not only a slogan, it's a reality. You can create only by reducing by half the gender gap with other emerging economies create $1 trillion of economic output. $1 trillion
$1 trillion.
of economic output.
Wow.
Therefore, it's very important. It's not an issue of social equality, it's an issue of strategic economic purpose. How to achieve this? There are certain number of policy dimensions, there are certain number of reform dimensions, and there is change in the mentality. The policy dimensions, there are certain number of investment and policies that are needed. You need to equalize legal issues. There are a lot of legal disparities. Two, you need to provide the infrastructure that allows women to work, socially, transportation, and also in terms of capacity building. Those are the policies. But there are also important reforms that are beyond the government. Private sector need to recognize the importance and the role of women and to reduce the gap between the pay of women and men in the region. And it's not only the state that should do it, it's a social priority. And those are important reforms that will take time. And three, and this is something that I hope also will materialize. It's not only about increasing their economic contribution, increasing their economic decision contribution, allowing them to be not only in the labor market, but in the leading market. And this is something that also we need to work on. It's a priority, and it's something that, again, it's not only for doing good, but making real big transformation to the region.
Are some countries maybe taking the lead in that in the region?
There are
good
good
examples?
initiatives. We mentioned Saudi. The participation of Saudi women in the economy is growing. We see in the UAE many young ministers, female ministers,
yeah.
very active, well empowered. I think the rest culturally should have been as entrepreneurial because we have a huge talent and the capacity that exists, and the knowledge wealth that we have is even more important than the oil wealth that we have in the region. Therefore, I think it has to be more systematic in policies, and we are mainstreaming this gender priority. People would say, why you at the fund you do this? Because it's macro critical.
Absolutely. And it all links together, as you said, in terms of growth generation. Now we touched briefly on climate change. The region is one of the most affected by climate change globally. We don't talk about it that much, but it's a fact. Two particular countries are at great risk: Kuwait and Iraq, due to increased heat. And I know that climate action has been integrated, through work with the fund and the bank. How is this sort of shifting your vision on how to promote strategies with stakeholders from the government? Are you adding the climate risk to the other general factors of risk that you're assessing through macroeconomic policies and other aspects of the economy?
Well, I share your concern about the climate risks. And we did recently a series of studies showing that temperature has increased in the last 20 years at double speed than the global average.
Absolutely.
And there are immediate and clear economic impact in terms of loss of output, loss of jobs. We did also assess the needs in terms of adaptation, what a region that is not one of the highest emitter needs in order to adapt. Also, we did another set of work on impact of climate on the financial sector, both risks and opportunities. Yes, clearly, this is something that the region cannot ignore. This is something that the region needs to address. And this is something that the region can build on as an opportunity, because you have the resources for that, I would say. If you only reform the subsidy system, you can have, in terms of resources to be dedicated to climate investment, almost $1 trillion. If you can use the unique features that we have in the region with sovereign wealth funds who are long-term by nature investors in assets, we could also invest in a very strategic transformation on the climate side. And three, there are countries who are extremely vulnerable Some of them have resources like Kuwait and Iraq to address it, but some do not have. And we saw recently certain
Absolutely.
number of climate disasters. We saw in Libya
Hmm.
last year, an important climate disaster. We see it every year in Sudan or Somalia, where we have in the same year drought and flood. And we have done a study with our uh, African colleagues on the impact of climate on vulnerabilities and conflict. And there is strong correlation between climate issues and conflict and instability issues.
Yeah. Jihad, just would like to maybe take the last few seconds to close with your perception of what's coming next in the region. Are we projecting different scenarios? If the tension escalates further, what is the worst case scenario for the economy? What is the best case scenario for the economy?
Well, very difficult to, in this level of uncertainty, we have a huge geopolitical foggy situation today. It's very difficult to predict. Clearly, increase in tension will translate negatively on the economy, will translate negatively on the neighboring countries affected by that, and will have a huge social cost. We have tried to assess the impact, but I would say if this conflict will last longer or deeper or will broaden, yes, it will be negative news for the region, for a region that requires more time to heal the previous shocks, starting from the COVID or the shocks before, and address its potential for the future. Therefore, yes, we are in a very uncertain situation. Throwing numbers is not great
Yeah.
because you can always use scenarios, but clearly the impact is not only short term, the impact could be long lasting, and this is something that we want to highlight and underscore the importance of not only address the immediate issues, but address the longer and deeper rooted issues, which would require, I think, for the region to have a new approach for how we build the future of the region, the whole region.
Thank you very much, Jihad. This has been a very insightful conversation as ever. We've learned a lot. We're always happy to hear your perception of what's coming next, and we look forward to our next conversation with you. We wish you the best of luck in the last few meetings of the spring week.
Thank you for having
And
me.
of course, it's a pleasure. It's an honor also.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.